You guys know this is only half the books I have, right? Hello you dirty potters, how are you today? This video isn't for people who want to make their glazes straight from scratch like a chemist would. This video is for someone who found a glaze recipe either online, on Digital Fire, on Glazy, or even on Pinterest and just wants to know how to put it together. So this video is just going to be for anybody who has a glaze recipe and wants to learn how to put it together. Making your own glazes is not only cheaper, it allows for a much better relationship with your artwork. You can control your medium a lot better, you can control your colors a lot better, and you get into this kind of intimate relationship with the chemistry of making your own glazes, which allows you to control it a lot better. Half the time I can take a glaze from a shelf and modify it to my own accord because the bottle has done half the work for me. Now if you don't already have a glaze recipe, I have a very standard one that most potters know for you coming up in a second. But for any of you who want to go above and beyond, there are books and books and books and tiny pieces of paper and books and books and books that have tons and tons and tons of information that'll teach you not only how to make, but to handle your glaze recipes in a proper and safe manner. And not only that, they also teach you a lot of information about the chemicals themselves on a chemistry level. These books are a cornucopia of information that you will need for making your own glazes. For those of you who are just starting out and don't know what book to buy, I suggest the Glaze book by Stephen Murfitt. It has this kind of blue binder on it right here, and that's kind of how I know it. But this is a wonderful book and has a lot of information on the front pages that'll teach you about all the chemicals and how to really handle your glazes. Not only that, this book has tons and tons and tons of glaze recipes that you can follow for your own atmospheres and everything you might need. But if you're looking for an online glaze, like a lot of people are who don't have the time to just go out and get a book, then I will post the links down below for you to glazy.org and Digital Fire. I like Digital Fire because they usually put the chemistry up there and the AKA names of some chemicals, but I like Glazy because they put the unity formula up there so I can know how much of what element is inside my glazes. But we won't worry about that for now. We'll do that in a later video. You guys know this is only half the books I have, right? But before we get started, let's go over some of the equipment. The first thing you're going to need is a gram scale. And no, I'm not talking about that one on Amazon that's $20 and breaks in 2 months and is highly inaccurate half the time. I'm talking about a good quality gram scale, something that'll last you a long time. Shoot for like 40 bucks and up. A lot of old school potters will use the triple beam gram scale, and that's highly accurate, but I don't think for what we're doing today, we're gonna need one. So the majority of beginner potters can start off with a good quality gram scale. Secondly, you're gonna need something to put your chemicals in. The third thing you're gonna need is a sieve and or mesh. Now this right here is a 40 mesh or a 40 sieve, and you're gonna need one of these because half the time whenever you buy chemical, it doesn't come in this wonderful powdered form. Sometimes you get giant chunks and rocks inside of it, and you need to sieve it through this thing right here. So you're definitely gonna need one of these. Fourthly, you will need something to put your glaze in. We're making a very small batch today, so we just get in a nice tight good mason jar. The fifth thing you're gonna need is a towel because you are crazy if you think this is gonna be a clean process. And the sixth and most important thing you're going to need is a particulate mask. You are definitely going to need one of these because if you don't wear this and you breathe in some of the chemical, it will get inside your lungs and it doesn't come out. Silicosis is a very large worry for the majority of potters, and this is why you need to be wearing some sort of mask so you don't breathe in the chemicals that you're messing with. For anyone who doesn't know, silicosis is a condition where silica gets trapped inside the alveoli of your lungs and you slowly lose capacity to breathe. Once silica gets inside your lungs, it does not come out, so you need one of these. If you don't wear this, I will find you, I will memorize your bedtime and your address, and I will come over there and I'll do some things to you while you're sleeping. I will steal your puppy away from you. The very last thing you're going to need, and I almost didn't include this on the list because it's kind of common sense, is a scooper. You're going to need to scoop those chemicals out so you can put them in the measurement, so you can measure them and put them in the jar. The recipe I have for you guys today is called the 5x20. Now this is a really common glaze recipe simply because it just requires the very basic common glaze chemicals, and it's 20% everything. So it's 20% Wollastonite, 20% Custer Feldspar, 20% Frit 3134, 20% Edgar Plastic Kaolin, and 20% silica. Here's the problem with a lot of glaze recipes. Some of them just say flint or silica. They have multiple names for every chemical, But this silica right here is 325 mesh, but you wouldn't know that unless you were a potter. The majority of potters use silica 325 mesh unless they're using a lower and more granular silica for some other reason. Or sometimes you read a recipe that just says feldspar on it, and that means you can replace it with damn near any feldspar. You can use F4 Kona feldspar, you can use Custer feldspar. Technically speaking, you can even use the substitute for F4 Kona feldspar, which is Minspar 200, which I hate so much. I know that reading a recipe can be a little bit intimidating, especially after you buy all your chemicals and you have all your equipment and you're just kind of standing there like, what do I do now? But it's actually really simple math. See, everything is done by percentages. This 5x20 recipe is 20% wollastonite, 20% Custer feldspar, and so on and so forth, times those 5 chemicals. That means this recipe adds up to 100%, and the majority of recipes you come across are going to add up to 100%, not counting in the oxides, colorants, and carbonates, which are the things that make color. But today we're just making a non-colored thing, we're just making a base. So because everything ends up being 100 grams at the end, or 100%, that means 20% of 100 is 20 grams. Right? So let's say you're making one batch. That means you're making 100 grams. That means inside this little jar right here, you're going to end up putting 100 grams of stuff inside here, and it's going to add up with all these chemicals. So 20% of that 100 grams is going to be wollastonite, 20% of it's going to be Custer feldspar, 20 grams of it is going to be Custer, 20 grams of it's going to be wollastonite, and so on and so forth until you reach 100 grams. So today we're going to make a 200 gram batch, which means we're making 2 batches because every batch is 100 grams. That means we're going to multiply all these percentages right here times 2. So I'm going to be using 40 grams of wollastonite. I'm going to be using 40 grams of Custer feldspar and 40 grams of Frit, 40 of EPK, and so on and so forth until I reach 200 grams. And that's basically how you read a glaze recipe. There's a large problem with potters calling things other things, but those things still being the things. For example, if somebody puts on their kaolin, you don't know which kaolin to use. Are you using SD or plastic kaolin? Are you using straight kaolin? Are you using China clay? What are you using? Or if someone puts Frit, are you using Frit 3110? Are you using Frit 3134? There's a bunch of different Frits out there, and no one really knows which one if you just put the bottom one. So if you ever get confused about the name of a chemical or something inside of a recipe, what I want you to do is go to digitalfire.com, and they have an entire section of also known as. So sometimes I put in China clay and it'll turn up groggle. Groggle is essentially the same thing as China clay. Or if I put in silica, it'll put in different variations of silica. It'll put flint, it'll put 325 mesh. Some potters even put sand on theirs because technically sand is damn near silica. Because not everybody in different parts of the world call the same things what we call them. So let's go ahead and start putting this together, right? Firstly, put on your mask. Put on your mask. Yeah, I saw you not wearing a mask. So get your gram scale, turn it on, and it should have all zeros when you turn it on. Then put your cup that you're going to put the chemicals in on it, and it'll start to weigh out numbers. This right here needs to go away because we don't want the weight of the cup, we want the weight of the chemicals in the cup. So I'm going to push the button tear, and it'll go to 0, 0. Now anything that I put on extra will be weighed, but nothing else. So even if I put this little tiny thing right here on there, it'll still go up a little bit, and that'll give me the weight of this, but not this. And this is essentially how you're measuring only your chemicals. So I got my scooper, I have my chemical here, and what I have to figure out now is how many batches I need of this glaze. I already know it's 20% wollastonite, so if I need 2 batches of this glaze, I'm going to times that by 2, and that's how many grams I need. So I need 40 grams of wollastonite. Once I have this 40 grams, I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it inside of this jar right here. And I'm going to put it back on. And once I make sure it's 0, 0, I'm going to move on to the next chemical. Whenever I'm making a glaze, what I like to do is put all my chemicals I need on the right hand side and then put all the ones I've already done on the left hand side. That makes sure that I know that I've already done that chemical so I don't redo them and mess up the glaze. Okay, cool. We have all the chemicals in this jar right now, and now we have to go get our water. Now I know there's going to be somebody in the comments below who's going to ask, should I use purified water? I've never used purified water, but I've also heard of potters using purified water and everything turns out fine. So if you're really curious, I suggest using purified and not purified water and seeing how it goes. Otherwise, I'd say no. Go ahead and slowly put that water straight into your chemical, but don't use too much water. I didn't use all the water, see? That's because it's a lot easier to mix in more water than it is to take away water. Stir it in there, stir it in there. Now you've probably noticed that there's no glaze recipes that really come with an amount of suggested water to put inside your glazes, and that's because it's different for every person. I like my glazes a little bit thicker. I mean, well, I like everything a little bit thicker, to be honest with you. I like my glazes a little bit thicker. Some people like theirs a little bit thinner. Some people spray their glazes. Some people paint their glazes. Some people dip their glazes. It's all really up to you, and you're gonna learn what amount of water you like inside your glazes over time. One of the main reasons I put my glazes inside of a jar is because after you're done mixing them, they're airtight. So instead of stirring your little wrists away, you can clearly just seal them up and shake the crap out of them. And make sure all that good chemical comes off the bottom right there. And here is your very first glaze, but don't make the mistake of thinking you're done just yet. You still have to sieve this bad boy. You guys remember that mesh I was talking about earlier? Go ahead, put that on top of something, and sieve this stuff inside of that mesh. And just kind of pour it in very quickly, not slowly at all. Now you probably see what I'm talking about. You see all those little dots in there? That was going to stay inside your glaze and not go on your pottery very smoothly. So what you need to do is you need to get some kind of brush or some type of item and just push those straight through. So this has been sieved one time, but you're going to have to sieve this multiple times until you notice it's nice and smooth and you don't see any more of those clumps in there. And every time you sieve this from one jar to another, it'll get smoother and smoother and smoother until you have no more clumps in it. And you see this? You see this right here? This is how your glaze should look afterwards. It should be kind of creamy depending on what thickness you want it, but it should still be extremely smooth and have no particulate left in it. And what I mean by particulate are these big chunks of chemical that come from the chemicals not being sieved properly. And if you really want to check, what you can do is put it on your container one more time, put it right through, and see how smoothly it goes inside. See, it doesn't clump up anymore. Not only that, this is a really big difference from the first time I showed you the sieve where there were giant chunks of chemical in there. You barely have any chunks anymore. This is kind of how your glaze should look afterwards. But remember, this is a 40 mesh, and it usually takes me about 3 or 4 sieves back and forth in the cups to get the real consistency that I want to get out of my glaze. But whenever I have an 80 mesh or a 120 mesh, I usually do it 4 to 5 times, and the particulates end up much finer. As a little bonus tip, you see all that stuff in there? You don't really want to waste that chemical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little tiny bit of water in there, swash it around, and go ahead and just put that right back into the glaze. Now this isn't really important for this glaze specifically, but imagine if you had something with oxides and carbonates in it and all the color is stuck at the bottom. You still want that good color out of there. So it's a good idea to get a brush or some water and go ahead and wipe out whatever you have and dump it into your main glaze container. Please remember to wash your equipment and your brush immediately after you're done using them for glaze, because the glaze, the particulate, and the chemicals will harden around these surfaces here and get stuck, and if you want to make a glaze at a later time, you will get a tiny bit of contamination inside of your next glaze. So it's really important that you wash your stuff immediately after you're done glazing. So it's really important you wash your equipment right after you're done making your glaze for the day. It's kind of like your dishes. If you wash them immediately after you're done eating, it's way easier to wash them than if you let them sit and get hard all day. Not only is it a good idea to rinse off your equipment and clean it after you're done, it's a very good idea to make sure that the inside is dry, because after you're done, if you decide to use more chemical inside this at a later time, that chemical is going to stick to that water, and then you're going to have one hell of a time mixing up your glaze. And especially when you're cleaning your sieve, make sure you get inside these little cracks right here, because particulate and colors and oxides and chemicals will stay on the inside of this little crevice here, and you don't want those to contaminate your next glaze batch. There we go, nice and clean, like a good potter. Alright, and there you go, you have made your very first base of your glaze. There's no colorants in this. This is just the base of a glaze. So this adds up to 100% because usually when you make an actual glaze with colors in it, you're gonna have 100% for your base and then some colorants will add a little bit over that 100%. Although I have encountered recipes that go up to 98% and they seem to do fine too, but usually you're gonna find the ones that go up to 100. Our job now is to test this glaze. It's actually extremely important to test your glaze after you're done making it on a test style on all the different variations of your clay. So I usually use about 3 different types of clay, so that allows me to see what will happen on each and every different type of clay. And I also think it's really important to make a tester bowl as well, just to see how the color comes out on a real product. This recipe is for cone 5/6 oxidation. You can test it in whatever atmosphere at whatever cone you like, but this specifically is supposed to be for cone 5/6 in an oxidation electric kiln. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put it in the kiln and see how it comes out. Okay, so I put it on a white test style and I put it on a brown test style, and we're going to put these in the kiln and we're going to see how it comes out tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow.
Okay guys, I just got home from work and it looks like the kiln setter went off a little bit early, so we're going to go in this kiln and we're going to see Astro Boy, get out of here! And look at that, they came out exactly how they thought they would. This is not a clear base, it's just a standard 5x20 base. This is one of the glazes that I first started out when I was making glazes, and I really hope it helps you guys out. I suggest you put your mask on and try this one at home. Now these 2 test styles came out fine, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get me a notebook and I'm going to write down what clay it was on, how I glazed it, how many layers I glazed it, and in what atmosphere this was in. So this was in cone 5/6 oxidation electric kiln, and you should have your own notebook over time of how your glazes react, what they were, what the recipes were to them, and this is my book and this is my backup book. So I highly suggest you have a pre-book and an actual book. This book is kind of for all the stuff that I test, and this is for all the stuff that works. And over time, you're gonna get your own book and it's gonna be full of glaze recipes, and you're well on your way to making a lot of your own glazes. Well, thank you guys very much for joining me. I really hope that cleared up some confusion with putting glaze recipes together, because when I was new, I had no idea how to read a recipe. I didn't know where to find information. I didn't know where to get recipes. I didn't know that I was supposed to have my own glaze book. I didn't know that I was supposed to have test styles. There's a lot of things I didn't know, and so a lot of this information will be fairly common to potters who already put the glazes together. But as far as I'm concerned, this could have really helped me when I first started out. So thank you very much for joining me. If you'd like to see any of my artwork, the links are down below. And I will see you Dirty Potters next week. A clean studio is a happy studio.